And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Friends of the HarborWalk and then very specifically about the signage project that we have going there. The Friends of the HarborWalk were founded 4 years ago. It's a group of all volunteers, and our mission is really very straightforward. We want to enhance enjoyment of the HarborWalk, which includes letting people know that it even exists, and how long it is, and where it is, and all those kinds of things. We do 3 major things. One is we do monthly walks of different segments of the HarborWalk to introduce people to them, tell the story of, tell the history of. We have the signage project, which I'll be talking about again in a minute. And the third part is that we facilitate HarborWalk cleanups. When corporations have, groups who want to go out and do good things for the day, and they contact us, we put them in that dirty spot and make them pick it all up and stick it in bags, and the city takes it away. So those are sort of the 3 major arms of what we do. For the signage project, we've been looking primarily at the interpretive signs that don't exist along most of the HarborWalk, and then wayfinding signs that are, that will be maps that show you where it actually is. I kind of think probably the north end is the neighborhood that is least well signed. I might be wrong on that. I've walked a lot of segments of it.
Really tight competition for this well signed, unfortunately.
And we really want to change that. We want people to know that there is this wonderful public amenity that we all have a right to walk on. Go to it, go walk on it, walk all along, all around the wharves and enjoy the waterfront. That's the point of it. I'm going to zoom in onto the interpretive signs, which has sort of been most of what we've been doing. We've been working on that pretty intensely for about 2.5 years. Our sense from the beginning was that if you do walk along stretches of the HarborWalk, you see an incredible mishmash of interpretive signs if they exist at all. You can walk 50 feet and see 2 completely different designs of, an interpretive sign. And what we came to the city saying is, could we have a template designed with lots of voices and lots of input that will be consistent moving forward along the HarborWalk? So it's like the National Park Service that has a branding and a style. It's like DCR, it's like anybody who brands their style, and it's consistent so that you may not really think about it, but it sort of resonates that, okay, I'm still on the HarborWalk, and there's a little HarborWalk sign, etc. So we worked with landscape architects, community input, graphic designers, developers, the city, and basically developed a template that seemed to reflect, as best as everybody could figure out, sort of best practices for an interpretive sign. And essentially the thought is one really dominant image, space below that is very flexible. It could be a mugshot, it could be an artifact, it could be quotes from the community, it could be, this is a very flexible space for us to use. Text that needs to stay around 160 words, which is where Jan and I struggle the most. I usually start off with something that's about 250 words long and then start to cut and cut and cut and cut. And then just captions that describe the images. And the idea is that there will be 3 different background colors. I don't have the third one with me. But it's both to give the graphic designers some flexibility, because if you used this brown with this map, it would just kind of look like brown mush. So, it's nicer to be able to contrast it. So there are 3, background colors that can be chosen. But otherwise, that's pretty much what has been established as the interpretive sign template that we hope, as new signs go in, can be used, and as old signs that fade and they need to be replaced, that we can encourage the property owner to replace them with something that matches the template. So that's where we're headed. While this was going on, we were also sort of working with trying to figure out okay, which themes keep reappearing around the harbor? The harbor walk is actually 43 miles long. And which ones keep popping up, you know, in all the different segments? And basically it came down to, you know, the office, maritime industrial, transportation, recreation, immigration. Am I forgetting?
Environment.
Oh, ecological changes, you know, the whole filling in and changing the waterfront completely from what it was.
Military.
Oh yeah, political military events. And we use that just to sort of, at one point we thought we might have, you know, kind of something up here that said, you know, immigration story. And then we thought, the person reading the sign really doesn't care that that's where it falls into our little thematic thingy, you know. They can tell when they read that it's an immigration story, so we dropped it. But in our heads, as we plan the signs and as we think about which stories belong along the waterfront, what we're really trying to do is make sure that we touch them, that there's a mix of all kinds of things and that we haven't forgotten anything big. So it's kind of, you know, our own working piece. The other major thing that we do, and that's what Jan will talk about more specifically in terms of the North End, is that before we work in any neighborhood suggesting any signs anywhere, we create a master plan for that neighborhood. So we do a lot of research, we talk with people in the community, we read a lot of books, you know, we do a lot of homework, and we come up with sort of the ideal of, in this section, these are the stories that belong here. And if you move along here, on this wharf, these are the stories that belong here. None of it is set in granite, and I really want to emphasize that. It's a guide for us. It's a game so that when we approach a developer, we can say, you know, there are 3 really great stories on this site, and we want you to cough up the money for 3 signs. You know, words along those lines. You know, we need to know what we're asking for. We need to be able to say what the stories are there. And again, we want to have a balance. We don't want it all to be maritime industrial. We want all the other stories mixed in there too, and hence kind of the master. And again, Jan will be talking more specifically about that. Some of our first signs are going to be going in East Boston for the very simple reason that we've been following the money. When developers develop a waterfront property, or actually improve a waterfront property, they are required, obviously, to have a harbor walk that you all I'm sure know about, and often to have signage on that harbor walk. So the money's there. So rather than us trying to figure out where we're going to get funds to, you know, partner with or get somebody to put up a sign, you know, we simply meet with them and say, you know, as you know, your Chapter 91 license calls for 2 signs, let's talk about them. And what Friends of the Boston Harbor Walk does, what our team does is, we provide the content. We will do the research, we will find the images, we will do the writing, and then we hand it over to them. And they are responsible for them working with the template. You know, obviously there's a lot of discussion back and forth as they install it, and then they are responsible for the production. All the specs are being decided upon by, you know, the city and the landscape architects, etc. We just provide the content, and then they take it from there. Have I forgotten anything there? So these are basically the first 2 signs that are going into production this week, I'm told, that are going to be going at the Boston East site, which is kind of to the left of the Eddy, looking across the water on Border Street. And a third one about the historic marine railways that are there will be going in about a month after that. And then we have several on Clippership Wharf that are in their final stages, will be going in this fall. You know, and Hodge Boiler, I'm meeting with the developer tomorrow to talk to him about. He thinks he's going to have 1 sign. I'd really like him to have 2. So, you know, a lot of it is negotiation, obviously, to try to get people to, you know, to really celebrate all that has happened along the waterfront and bring it to people's attention. One other little piece is that we are working to have a website where we will have a QR code here that people can scan, and we'll also have the website address if you're not busy scanning it, with extra information. You know, 160 words to tell some of these stories is very little space. And so, you know, I mean, we can be blathering about clipper ships, but the person reading it would be going, you know, what the heck's a clipper ship? So that's the kind of stuff that we'd love to have on the website, you know, question, what's a clipper ship? Quick answer, you know, those kinds of things. Really sort of diving in a little bit deeper. And the other thing that we'd love to have on the website is audio, so that if people can't read the sign, that they can hear it. And some translations for sort of the most commonly spoken languages, both for visitors from abroad and for residents of Boston. And kind of anything else that comes, you know, websites are wonderful because you can do so much. But, you know, as Jan will talk about as well, we really welcome input from the community, and we'd love to have people involved with our team. Whether it's that you want to do a little bit of research, or you want to look for images, or you know somebody has a stash of wonderful historic photos in their attic, and let's all go through them. We would just really love to hear from the community, you know, what you know about the waterfront and what you'd like to see represented.
To that end, maybe a couple minutes, and then we can open it up, and you can provide.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And Jan will talk more specifically about the North End piece.
North End. So I am Jan Engelman again, and I am doing a master plan for the North End. And part of, I mean, I'm starting with a few ideas that I've gotten from my research, but absolutely, this is one of the reasons why we're here, is to get a lot of the stories. And one of the pieces that we could actually have of audio on our website would be stories of not just translations, but of community stories. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the North End waterfront and what is going to be covered on that. The waterfront, the HarborWalk is actually divided into different sections, and the North End section of the HarborWalk starts on the north side of Long Wharf and goes up the frontage of Christopher Columbus Park, and then starts going out the wharves, Commercial Wharf, Lewis Wharf, the Pilot House, and on, up not only to the Charlestown Bridge. I know the North End sort of defines itself as stopping there, but actually through that to Lovejoy Wharf. So the harbor goes to the dam, and the North End HarborWalk goes that far as well. So what I've been looking at is all those different spots, and doing a lot of historical research. I'm looking to see what stories there's information about, because that's another factor. You can have a really great story about something, but if you can't find images to put on a sign for it, it's more difficult to make it come alive for people. So I'm not going to go through what you know, the whole, what I have so far. First of all, I'm not finished, and second, so I'm not at that point yet, but I do want to give you sort of a flavor of the kinds of things that I've been looking at. So along the frontage by Christopher Columbus Park, I've been thinking a lot about T Wharf and the fishing fleet. That was the center of the fishing fleet through 1914, when it then moved to Fish Pier in South Boston. Another thing that I was going to talk about was the evolution of that area, the Christopher Columbus Park, because as the artist pointed out, the original shoreline was much further back. And there's a lot of history there in terms of where the original shoreline was, the filling, there were packet piers, then that was the area where the produce market was, all of this before Christopher, the park was built. So there's a lot of good history there that I think could really come alive with the appropriate sort of images and talk. But as Liz pointed out, we are not producing the signs, we are opportunistic. We have a master plan so that if somebody is going to make changes, we say, well, we have some ideas of what could go there. And one example of that is the Langholm Park that the city is going to be renovating. And we have been in discussions with them and told them we have ideas for 4 to 6 interpretive signs in that area. So I have talked to some people in the North End, trying to get in touch with others that I know have been, are interested in history as well. We are focusing on the waterfront part of it. But there are waterfront stories. Like, it's interesting that I was thinking of having a story that was focusing on the North End, even though the HarborWalk is not there, because of the Mariner's House and the Siemens Brembo and the fact. So we're not, the stories are those stories that are focused on the North End's relationship to the sea. Activities on sea, perhaps, or along the waterfront. So I would really, I'm really excited about this. And I'm hoping that that some of you will have either ideas yourself or know of people that you think might have information, people that you think would be particularly good to review the master plan to make sure we're not missing any stories. As we say, it's not cast in concrete. But the more we know ahead of time and the better prepared we are when a development comes up to say, we have some great signage we think should go in there, I think the more likely it is to happen. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I think what you're doing is great. And there's lots of history around this neighborhood, and for that, thank you. That being said, you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of space along the North End waterfront that there isn't a lot of signage and people aren't going there. And I have to say personally that that's kind of nice. It's a refreshing break. Considering that there's 1.5 million people who visit the aquarium in 2016, they may go a little bit past Joe's Bar and Grill, but they're not going up where the residents are. They're not going up where Battery Wharf is. That's a place that residents go for solace. The North End Waterfront ran an article a couple of days ago. It was a reader's poll that said, where do you go in the North End to find peace? And I wrote, I'll never tell, because the moment you tell is the moment that you find tourists, loud kids, people who dump their Mike's pastry crap all over the place. And so if you're really gonna have signs that are directing people into our neighborhood, where's the responsibility of having more trash receptacles, making sure that maybe there's, I don't know, some sort of, at Christopher Columbus Park, there's a park ranger that monitors certain things. There's very limited places where the community can actually go to have a place of solace. And I have my favorite spot. I'll say it by Battery Wharf, and I go down there and it's quiet. Not too many tourists know about it. So if you're directing those 1.5 and growing people from the aquarium to our neighborhood, to me, it's for the community, it's a shame. For history, it's great, but for the community, how do you support that?
No, that's a really good point. It is a public way. That's what I can say. I don't think we're going to have or suggesting any signs at the busiest places saying, oh, by the way, if you want quite a stretch, head down that way, and and have hundreds of thousands of people flooding that way.
I think also it's it's not so much directing people to a certain place, it's more letting people know that this is public. Like, for example, I walk out on Commercial Wharf, for example, and I feel like, am I trespassing? No, you're not trespassing. As a member of the public, you have a right to be in certain places. So it's more like, and also Battery Wharf, as you mentioned, is a place that actually has a lot of interpretive signs, which is the main part of our, we're not really addressing Battery Wharf because the job in Battery Wharf is done, and yet it hasn't really brought lots of people there. So I think it's a balance, but we're not having don't think Freedom Trail.
Great.
Well, I think too, especially you get to Sergeant's Wharf where the parking lot is, and you don't even know how to get to the
Well, and that becomes dangerous too, where the parking lots are. I would say keep the signs away from the parking lots, because when you're walking, people walk in the parking lot, and then people are backing up, and it can
there's a whole larger project, which is to make the harbor, at places like Commercial Wharf or Lewis Wharf, which is outside of our purview, which is to make the HarborWalk to designate a place that is safe to walk on. that isn't, where you're not walking through a parking lot. And that's a larger project than the one that we're working on. What the project that we're working on is when those things are done, and that's part of Boston Harbor Now, our larger organization, is working on things like that, like making sure that new developments actually have HarborWalk like you see at Battery Wharf and Burroughs Wharf. Our project is to make sure that when people are walking along it, that they know something about what has gone on there, or what is going on there now, that their experience is a little richer. Although you're absolutely right, there is something to be said for just the beauty of the harbor.
But as long as you keep it to the areas where the tourists go, around the aquarium, Christopher Columbus Park, it just, I wouldn't say, let's not encourage more people to go to where it's more dangerous and perilous.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's not.
We can show them where the map is,
Right.
over in the other area.
Right.
They're just talking about, the public has access to this.
Right,
So it's just
but we
showing
don't
where
wanna
they have the access.
Right, but we don't want to put
Yeah.
I understand.
station points,
Yeah, if I
encouraging
could
people to
just-
visit that station.
Make another, or add something. We're also working with the Boston Shipyard and Marina, where the new ICA is opening up. And they have those issues in spades about safety, where it's safe for people to go. And so it's not something that, we're planning, or the ICA is actually planning to have people come over there for their satellite. But we are working with property owners to make it, so that the people who do come there can enjoy it safely. And we are not intending to send people into parking lots.
But to your point, I think it's wonderful. I really like it. And I'm not sure that signs are going to attract more people to the waterfront, but it's going to educate people who do go to the waterfront. Let's face it, walking along the water is tranquil, it's peaceful, it's one of the beautiful reasons to be here. And anything you can do to learn more about what happened on this parcel of water, or what happened 100 yards away, I think it's a good thing. So I applaud what you're doing.